Okay. Alrighty. Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting on October 10th, starting at 6:06 p.m. I'm David Rathgeb, chairing for Connor Kurtz, who is on the phone. Right, Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
And we also have from the board Carol Bites. Mr. Wolf is sitting in as a member of the public. Ex officio, sorry. My apologies. Let's see, Mr. Hurley, Mr. McKnight, Mr. Miller, Mr. Repko, Mrs. Megan Weber, I'm sorry, Mrs. Yeah, and we have Mrs. Kiesel. So I think that, and no public. So, all right, so let's get right over to the agenda. So old business. Last meeting, Mr. McKnight had handed out the AP Human Geography, I guess syllabus, I guess what you would call it. I know Mrs. Bites had asked for some time to review that before we make a recommendation.
Well, I deeply respect Mr. McKnight's recommendation, so I'm disinclined to really throw any roadblocks in the venture, but I would just caution that perhaps we watch how the climate change issue, page 40, is taught. I guess that's one of my concerns, that it's not played up too much. And because I don't know that's exactly science yet. And that was, I guess that's among my biggest concern.
Well, if my recommendation then would be, taking into account Mrs. Bites' concerns, if we could recommend that the full board approve this course for addition to the course catalog next year.
I'm fine with that.
So, my only question then. So, obviously, when it comes to taking your AP test, I'm going to take a stab. It's probably going to be a question on global warming in there.
It may or may not be. It's pretty broad. When I taught AP World History, the questions become so finite sometimes that they ask one about women in the Muslim world. There's a lot of things they could ask. You may get a global warming type question, environmental question, may not. It changes each year. So one thing I will say is we can go back and vet. And this conversation started 2 years ago. Right. We can go back and re-vet the textbook offerings recommended by AP. They usually recommend 5 or 6 acceptable books. And we can come back and kind of take a look at that, a deeper look. It's not.
Well, yeah, and like you say, it's the way it's taught too.
Right.
Teachers just mitigate.
It needs to be a conversation with everything.
Here's the thing, exactly.
Yeah. So.
Fair and balanced.
That would be, my biggest concern.
Okay. Well then, if we're, are you in agreement, Mr. Kurtz? Then we should recommend we move forward with this for next year.
Right.
You're okay with that, Mrs. Bites?
Yes.
Okay. So I am as well. So we'll make that recommendation then at the board meeting tonight, I would think. Yes, Mr. Kurtz?
Yep.
Mr. McKnight, thank you.
I'll report on that in my committee
Exactly.
report.
Total transparency.
Okay. Good. So the foreign language workshop group. So we need to select a committee representative. Is that what I'm gathering here?
Right. I had a conversation with Mr. Hurley yesterday in light of our previous discussion in the committee, and he would like, and I agreed that it would be good to have somebody from the board participate in these discussions, and the purpose of these discussions and this group is to really come up with a cohesive vision for foreign language in Daniel Boone, looking at what we should be teaching, what we are teaching, what we want to be teaching, and really including a variety of stakeholders. And And I thought instead of perhaps going through all the formality of appointing a full-on board representative, perhaps we could appoint a representative from the C&I committee. And seeing as this is where this began, I figured it would be a good place to start. That way it would only require the committee's approval.
Okay.
So if there's any volunteers.
Also, I'll just real quick let the record show that Mr. Okos Anil came in at 6:10, so he's now present. So looking for a volunteer to, who else is going to be on this committee?
We have our department chair for the foreign language department. We have another administrator beyond myself. We also have a parent who's a foreign language teacher in another school district. So that's the start of our committee. Actually, we have two parents, and
Okay.
so that's the start of our committee. We need a board member to round out the committee.
Okay.
Won't take that much time, guys.
I should just nominate one of them since they're busy in a
works.
so it looks like maybe Mr. Okos Anil is volunteering.
Great.
Is that, did I?
That's fine. No, that's fine.
That works.
That was easy, yeah, that's
There we go.
good. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Next item in old business is curriculum writing tracking software.
Yeah, we'd like a little.
Yes.
We'd like a little more time on that one, guys, to review some of our options. So in November, if we could push that one till November, that would be great.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so we'll hold that one over for next month. All right, new business then. District test score discussion, Mr. Hurley.
Okay, each one of you, I gave you a binder, and basically it's a summary of our district testing data. It's not all encompassing. We can provide more data than you'd ever want to look at. If I can highlight a couple things, if you notice in here, we have PSSA scores, our SPP scores underneath of the tab. Post-secondary education data, SAT data, Keystone data, our WIDA testing data, our AP testing data, and our PVAS testing data. If I might, what I'd like to do is just highlight a couple items for you as a board and things that you might be interested. And then Mr. McKnight's going to present on some high school specific things. And then in each of our next curriculum meetings, our middle school and our elementary schools will certainly add more color to what I'm saying here right now. But let me just give you a general overview. First, if you can flip over to the SPP tab. If you go back a couple pages there, you can see Amity Elementary Centers, right, the first one there. The SPP data point, the score that's there in front of you, and you can see Amity has a 79.6. That is a school rating that the state gives us in regards to each of our schools. The schools are, depending on the level of the school, it's a little bit different from elementary to middle to high school in terms of the metrics that are actually used. But primarily what you're going to see is 50% of your data has to do with this score, has to do with student achievement. That's did they hit the state benchmark, whether it's 65%, 75%, whatever the state benchmark is in that subject. The other 50% of the data has to do with indicators of academic growth or academic other indicators. Like, for example, they have something in there called PVAS data. PVAS data has to do with where did the students start, where do we expect them to be, and did they grow? For example, one of the problems you have with achievement data is that if a student comes in reading at a second grade level, it's not realistic to expect that student, if they're in sixth grade, to hit that sixth grade benchmark in 1 year, to grow off 5, whereas seeing a year of growth would be a good thing. So the PVAS tells us, did the student grow in essence 1 year during that year? So PVAS is a growth metric. Also in the SPP scores themselves, you can see things, other indicators of academic achievement, like graduation rate, how are our advanced students doing, how are we doing with the top level students in our school district. That's in there. Attendance rate, that is something that we target as a district. We do truancy intervention plans. I mean, there's reasons why our scores are in the 90% down there. So there's a whole variety of different metrics that go into the SPP score. Depending on the level, again, there's more metrics, for example, at the high school level than there are in some of our younger grades in the district that goes into that score. But that's how the state looks at the schools. Now, with that said and done, this is not all-encompassing, and nor should it be all-encompassing. We should look at our schools through not only these metrics, but also other metrics that we create. And Mr. McKnight's going to talk about some of them in a minute that he has at the high school, and certainly our middle schools and elementaries will talk about some of their internal things that they do. If you take a look at the SPP scores, and in that section itself, you can see Amity's score was a 79.6. If you look, and you can page through there, you can see the scores of our other buildings. Birdsboro was our lowest at 60.7. You can see Monocacy was 96.6. You can see the middle school was at 77.7. And you can see the high school was at 77.4. You can see at the top of the ratings, that talks about the academic achievement. That's the pure, did they hit the grade level benchmark, okay? So what you're looking at, generally see, if you see lots of blue and green, okay, you can see how it's color coded on the right-hand side of those. You want to see lots of blue and green, simply put. Where the reds, that causes, we ask additional questions. You'll notice if you go through, like when you talk about pure achievement, in grades 3 through 8, you need to understand that pure achievement, it's changed. The PSSA has changed. We are now testing the kids according to the PA core, which is in essence the Common Core assessment. The test is much harder, particularly in math. It's also harder in ELA and language arts. That you're going to see, our students haven't changed in Daniel Boone, but the tests have, they're harder, okay? And we're going to grow in there. So in particular, in those grade levels, take a look at the growth metrics, which are the PVAS metrics on the next page, and see, did our students grow from where they are, okay? Ultimately, did we make more of a year's growth in those particular areas? This right now, just so you know, and Connor asked me to talk briefly about this tonight, this is still in draft form from the state. They may adjust this slightly. These are pretty accurate based on what the data we have, but you might see some slight adjustments when the final version comes out. The state takes a long time to get these out. Remember, we tested last spring with these kids. They're finally they just got the drafts to us a week and a half ago on this, but we wanted to at least give you an idea of where our schools will fall in.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yeah.
Where are the PVAS scores?
The PVAS scores are on the second page of each one of those, and you can see, some of them are on the second page, I'm sorry. Hold on, some are on the bottom of the first page for each building, and some are on the second page. You can see
Oh, okay, I see
some of
it.
those.
Indications.
Yeah.
Indicators of academic growth / PVAS. I got it, thank you.
Need to be printed in more senior-friendly font. For myself, it's very difficult to see.
I got it.
Some of the other tabs I just want to point out to you, and certainly you can page through this on your own also, but if you go to the first tab where it says PSSA, and again, that's pure achievement, I want you to note in both English and language arts, math, and science, okay, our district is clearly scoring ahead of the state, okay, and the state averages. If you go back to the first tab on the first page, you can see that we are ahead of the state average in all of those particular things. Some substantially, some less substantially, but you can see those particular areas and those subject areas. So when you compare us to the rest of the state, okay, we're doing okay. You know, we're doing okay there. If you tab back a little bit, go back to the last tab where it says PVAS, I believe it's yellow, all the way at the end. It's broken down even further and probably more detailed than what you need to have, but you can see our growth and did we hit our growth expectations over 3 years on the growth of the students. You want to see lots of green and blue, okay, hopefully. Where there's red, we start to do root cause analysis. We start to look at that data and we say, okay, why didn't they grow? It can be a whole variety of reasons. It might be we weren't teaching the curriculum exactly the way we want to. Might be we need to work on our teaching strategies. It may be getting used to new materials, to our Common Core materials. There can be a whole variety of things. One of the things we do today, and we did today in our staff development, is we were doing root cause analysis, and we were looking at the growth and the achievement of the students, and see, okay, where we did well, what are we doing, okay, and can we replicate that, and then where are areas that we can improve, okay?
Can I raise a potentially controversial topic?
Sure.
Does our data, can we break it out into male, female?
Depends on what you're looking for. In terms of, I probably couldn't do that with PVAS data. I probably could do that with pure achievement data for you. I could probably do that.
Mr. Goodnight can answer the question off the top of his head. If you were to look at the graduating class, would you find more females in the top as far as scores, as class rank?
I'll get the answer for you exactly. I'll email
We
you.
can do it.
Just your judgment.
Well, I'm just going to 2 years I was here for commencement, and I would say, yes, more girls seem to be in our top group because they're the kids giving the speeches.
Right.
I think we had one male in 2 years be on the stage for the speeches.
Yeah, I think you'll consistently find that probably the females are doing better in school than the males, except maybe if you look at SAT, the math scores probably you're going to find out probably higher, but overall. And my question is, do you need to teach? Has anybody looked at teaching differently to boys than girls?
Well, the answer is many people have looked at that issue. You have to be careful. That's been litigated. You can't really run all girl classes. You can't really segregate like that. So the thing to do would be having our teachers trained in strategies that may be more effective for boys than girls or girls than boys, depending on the content area. I think that when you talk about the whole model of differentiated instruction,
Right.
that's where that answer lies. A couple of years ago, people did that model where you pulled out girls for math, and that ended up in a lawsuit. So,
What if the parents voluntarily sign up for that?
well, you could sign up to commit your daughter to something, but then the parent of the son, may have a case because you're providing some additional services here.
Well, I'll say, what if you said, volunteer basis, if you want to be in an all-male class, you want to be in an all-female class?
Yeah, I'll send you the case law on that. You really can't do it.
Okay.
You really can't. You can't segregate.
As
Based on gender,
a
race, or other.
former teenage boy, you probably get more accomplished without the female.
Yeah, if you want to do those kind of things, then you have to go in the private domain, and we all know there are private schools that are all
Yeah.
girls or all boys. So.
So you could, in theory, differentiate in the
Right, if
blended
somebody
class.
identifies the strategies that are more helpful to girls than boys, or boys than girls, certainly. But what I found, when I was working in that line of work, that good, solid instruction and kind of meeting kids where they are and bringing them forward works on both girls and boys, and kind of defeating the stereotypes that girls may bring in on math or science. I'm not going to remember the name of it now, but there's a movement out there. Rob, you may know it's a STEM movement. I know when we were in Phoenixville, I didn't have anything to do with this, but there was a whole girl group on STEM, and they had a female fighter pilot flying on a helicopter, and this was all based around girl activity, but it wasn't in the class. It was a program that ran throughout Chester County to increase girls' relationships to science and math.
There's no question that the females can do math and science just as well, but that's not the normal. It's the outlier. You can look at the general population. And if you pull, I think it's either Indiana or Illinois. I think they're each student is required to take the ACT. Required. And if you look at those scores across the board, the male math score is higher and the female English, and reading score is higher.
One of the strategies, Mr. McKnight, I learned at my first year of college when I was a math minor, and I was told right from the get-go in my first college math class that women should be encouraged to ask questions. What he told us was that women make the mathematical connections at the same part of the brain where speech is formed, and that it's actually the opposite for guys. Speech interferes with the mathematical process. So if there's any truth to that, because I did find that to be true, halfway through your question, as a female, you actually get the answer.
There's a lot of research on gender bias and also racial bias in terms of teachers and how they engage kids. Not even intentional, just...
If those are strategies, though, that we can
I
employ and
understand.
learn, I would encourage us to, take advantage of that kind of training. If it's
And I think that we need, if we want to look into this and drive into this, and we see there's really an issue, then we let's do the analysis first to see if we have that story here. And then we can figure
So
out.
just to add, with all this data, I was thinking,
Yeah.
is there a way that we have?
Yeah, we can do it in greater detail. We can do a data analysis. And that's part of our root cause analysis when we look at different things. We look at, all right, why is this happening? Let me give you an example of something that's going well. If you look at the SPP of Amity, you could see a lot of growth in historically underperforming subgroups. It's excellent if you look at their scores. Matter of fact, you can attribute a lot of Amity's growth between the last time there was the SPP, which was 2 years ago, the last time the state released that, and now. And that didn't happen by accident. There's a lot of inclusionary practices that Shelley and Dane did at Amity, and that's that's primarily the reason why their scores went up, despite the fact they did real well there, despite the fact that the tests themselves are significantly harder. And so that's an interesting point, and that's part of the root cause analysis. Like, why is this working? And what did we do here, and can we replicate it? And then what isn't working, and why isn't it working, and what can we do better? And that's the real purpose of our data. Our data isn't really for high stakes testing. Our data is to really inform our practice so that we can replicate what's working and eliminate things that are not working. And so that's really what we're doing here.
That's awesome.
If you notice, and I'm not going to steal any of Mr. McKnight's thunder, there's some other tabs here. We have post-secondary education. We pulled about the last 10 years data. You can see how many kids are going to 4-year colleges, percentage-wise, 2 years, armed services. Mr. McKnight will actually add a little more color to this because I saw his presentation today he's going to do, and I like the metric he's going to use. He's looking at selective colleges, which is a metric I think we should keep going forward and keep tracking as a district, and I won't dig into that because he came up with that metric there himself, and I like that, and I think that's very good. You can see our SATs. If you flip over that, you can see our SAT scores, how they compare to Pennsylvania, how they compare to the country. I drilled back about 10 or 11 years of that data. There's some charts there. And one of the things you got to be careful with some of this data too is you want more kids taking SATs. You want more kids, and it's the same thing with the AP courses at the bottom. You want more kids to take them. If only a few of your best students are taking the SATs, of course the scores will be higher. What you really want is you want more kids doing and taking the test and the scores to continue to rise.
Right.
That's what we'd like to see. It's the same thing with AP courses. We really want as many kids that are capable and ready for AP courses to take those courses as you can, because that's our most rigorous and our best curriculum that we have. And so we want to encourage kids to challenge themselves, those that are ready for that challenge. We certainly would want it. So hopefully we see more kids taking APs, which I believe we have, and then hopefully the scores, and he was right there, we're increasing the numbers in APs that we're taking, but our scores are right there percentage-wise in terms of how many kids we're getting 3+. And Mr. McKnight will certainly add more color into that particular thing. But there's a lot of different data points in here that you can look at, and I'll turn the second piece over to Mr. McKnight to add some color to the high school specific piece.
Is there any questions for Rob before I get started?
Just one. When you go through the performance data, consistently, Birdsboro is way behind. But what are some of the mitigating factors for that?
Yeah, and today, we were working on that today, as I said, in services. One of the things we're looking at is we're looking at instructional practices that are happening at best. We want to make sure we're implementing best instructional practices. That always has an effect. Number two, part of achievement, when you look at achievement data, is where part of this metric, when you look at Birdsboro, is where the students are coming in. If a kid is reading and they don't have any phonemic awareness, and they're going into third grade with no phonemic awareness or very little understanding of phonics, they're starting low, and so we got to get them up to speed. And hopefully, we start with some of our at-risk programs with the pre-K counts and other things. We'll have less and less kids who are moving through our school district and are ready to learn in that particular situation. Mrs. Keys, if you'd like to share some of your root cause analysis today, you're welcome to share a few points on that also.
I have a few questions. First, actually, they both revolve really around math. I noticed our scores I'm very pleased to see that we're above average pretty much in every metric when it comes to the state and the nation. But specifically when it comes to math, I feel like we're not performing at the level we are when it comes to verbal and writing and science. So I was wondering just what strategies we're employing as a district to bring up those math scores.
Okay, first, Connor, right now we're still in the action planning. So each building, what they're doing, Connor, is they're developing an action plan specifically around the needs of their students in there. Our math scores per se, one of the things we're trying to do is we've been aligning our curriculum. We've got materials that are Common Core related and aligned to the Common Core. The other piece, what we're trying to do is, like, I'll give you an example. In 6th grade, I know Jenny's added some RTI instruction and shifted some of that because her math scores weren't quite where they wanted to be, and they've shifted some of that instructional time for the RTI stuff towards mathematics. Those are some examples. Right now, our teachers are also learning to teach using the Common Core, and the methodology has to change. The math is particularly changed. It's a bigger shift in mathematics to the Common Core than it is in ELA from what we were doing in the past. There's a lot more conceptual understanding rather than memorizing rote facts. I mean, yes, kids need to understand what 4 times 3 is, but they also need to know there are 4 groups of 3. There's a little bit of a shift there in terms of instruction and kids understanding. One of the things that's happened with the implementation in the state, they dropped the math on us. So, for example, if you were in 5th grade, okay, the Common Core hit us. We didn't start in kindergarten with this process and this methodology as we're going through. So we did see some improvement in various areas in our math. The achievement level is not where we want it to be yet. We're going to improve that and over time as we go forward.
Excuse me, Mr. Hurley, I'd like to respond to your question about action planning at Birdsboro. So we began by looking at our data, and obviously everyone needed to own that data. And then after that, what we did was come up with a list of all the things that may impact our student achievement at Birdsboro. So we came up with a pretty extensive list. Some of the things we could control, and some of the things we had no control over. For instance, let's see, support staff or resources were one of the things that we brought up. And really, we have very little control over our resources because, we get what we get, and that's what we have to work with as far as allocating resources. So we started out with, I'll bet there were at least 20 things on our list, and then we reduced that to about 6 things that really we had control over. So those are the things that we're going to focus on as far as what we can do to impact student achievement. So we did come up with a plan, I think a very good plan. That's where we get started. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Another one?
Go ahead.
Question, Con?
Yeah, I do have another question. Going off on the math front, looking at the high school AP scores this year for, I believe it was physics, I noticed that the number of students receiving 5s on their test, last year we had, I think, 5 or 6 students receive 5s, and a similar number receiving 4s, whereas this most recent AP cycle, we had no students receive 5s, and I think it was 5 or 6 students receiving 4s. I was wondering if there's any explanation behind that. It does seem like a large drop from having a solid number of 5s down to none. And I was just wondering if there was any explanation for that, or we think it was just a blip.
Yeah, I think looking at the AP numbers overall, I think you have to go broad to narrow. So collectively, there are the 3s, kids getting credit for the course at the college level is steady or increasing as we increase even the pool. I think when you get a 5 in physics or 5 on any of these tests, you're talking about your elite kids, and that's kind of unique to the to the student and to the grade level, Connor. So I'm not the grade level, but the class. Some years you're going to have a group of kids who are really strong and committed, getting 5s. The bigger concern for me is if we see a drop in the number of students who get 3s or 4s. They're getting the passing credit. That same group of kids who had 5s before, that's that, I think of it this way, that's that green team group, okay? They were, dedicated to the concept, to the science. This last group, was not as locked into that type of work. So I think the number of 5s reflect kind of a different level of commitment by a given student.
Connor, this is Dane. The other thing I would say about the standardized test issue is that I have a whole bunch of experience with standardized tests. I taught at Kaplan for a whole bunch of years. And to some extent, on tests like this, as the focus changes, you'll find that for instance, on the AP Physics exam, from year to year, oftentimes there'll be a differing weight of concentration on topics, and some years you'll find that the stuff that we hit the hardest will be the stuff that gets focused on, and some years you'll find that it doesn't. So to some extent, just variation in the test focus radically or can materially influence the scoring in tests like this.
All right. Thank you both. The one final point I have to make on the scores and the math portion specifically is more of a comment, and that's just moving forward, and this isn't an accusation by any means. I just wouldn't want us to lose sight. The state's going to be changing things. They're not going to stop changing things. There's always going to be stuff changing. But our math scores specifically, they haven't always been the strongest. Like, our verbal is just, I think, exceptional for our area and looking at it compared to other state and national trends. But math has never been exceptional. And writing also is good, but it's not as great as it can be. So I'm excited to hear about this action plan process, the planning process, and I look forward to hearing more about that as we move forward, because I think we can do better. We're doing well, but we can do even better.
Okay, Mrs. Weber, you ready? Time me. At 22, that's it. Okay, the high school guys. I sent you the draft. It was the draft that you had. There's a few subtle changes. I'll show them to you as we go. However, I think somebody asked from either the board or the administration, we had some good numbers and the ranking increased and what caused those. And there's many things that cause those. But I will say this, that, when you have accountability and you increase like a focus on a given target, it just, the line of what gets measured gets treasured, I think had a lot to do with that. And our teachers have been really working hard. And I have to just say it. I mean, I've certainly said things when I thought we could do more on that side of the aisle, and I'm telling you right now, they're working very hard. The kids are putting the culture in the high school right now, hopefully, is very positive with the kids. I hope it stays that way. It only takes one little instant to derail you, but right now, it's been very positive. Some of you received the email, I think, about the game the other night. Just a lot of positive vibes around the kids, around the community, so hopefully that keeps moving forward. Okay, so here's where we are. I like to use School Digger because it takes it and it's not the state, and it kind of runs it. And I sent the methodology to Jim because he wanted to know how was this calculated. They take the PDE information, but we moved up quite a bit from last year. It's the first time we've hit 4 stars, 184th out of 676 high schools. You see the demographic piece. One of the big pieces for me, and this kind of, circling back to the Birdsboro issue that you guys kind of brought up, it's our highest poverty school. And so you need poverty planning. You need to have a way to engage students in poverty. When you talk about differences, Mr. Rathgab, about girls and boys, well, poverty kids need more support. There's tons of evidence to that. So just as an aside, we have this percentage here. And what I was concerned about before was that we were not like our schools with 21% poverty. So that's kind of been the push that I've talked to the staff about and our team about, trying to move the needle forward. And they've accepted the challenge and have done good work. This is the high school against the state. We're the orange one. We should be the blue one. That would be better for our school thing, I guess, but not the results. We're outpacing quite a bit. You can see, in algebra, we're up in the 80s. In literature, Keystone, we're just under 80. And then in literature, we're over 85. That's some really good work by our people and our kids. Our kids are responding, because the first time they take the test, our results, of course, we all wish they were better. But the second time that kids who didn't pass it take it, and the supports they've gotten, and the teachers doubling back, looking at the data, because we've instituted some data teams at the high school, in Keystone, in in literature, in biology, and algebra. So they're looking at data. So it just focuses the point that, these are the things that we got to make sure we're hitting and going through. So doing a good job. Each of the assistant principals leads those data teams. Mrs. Weber leads algebra, Mr. Spore's biology, and right now Mr. Isselman is leading literature. And it really works out because Mrs. Weber is a math teacher, or a former math teacher, and Mr. Isselman is a former English teacher. So you really have people at that level who really understand it in deep detail. I did send this is the piece I sent out to you guys. This is really exciting information because here we are, and we're I think number 5 in Berks County. So that represents a growth. This growth here, moving up 223 slots in the state ranking out of 676, is quite a jump. But more important, this is a double-edged deal. I said to the staff this morning, we're number 16 in the state in terms of growth. Now, we had room to grow, so that's kind of the double-edged deal, that we needed to move it up. But the fact that our staff worked hard and moved it up to being number 16 is really, really commendable by that group. And the kids. It always comes down to the kids and parents responding to these calls, these interventions and opportunities. Here is the line graph that shows, from 2003, the statewide ranking pieces, and we've had a very good jump, and in fact, it's as high as it's ever been in the last 13 or 14 years. It's the best results we've ever had. So credit again to those guys. I'm not going to open up the SPP draft piece. You guys have it, don't you, in that booklet there? All the SPP pieces. So there's no need for me to pull that piece back up. But I will show you this. I asked our staff, I said, listen, the state gives us the SPP, and that is kind of like a baseline, lowest level type piece for me. We at least need to be doing well on that. That is not all we should be striving to do. So I sent out to our staff, what are other elements that we ought to be focusing on? And so I certainly had opinions about academic elements, but their point was, look, it's more than just about academics for all kids. It's academic, it's social, and it's emotional. So the things that you see listed there, we're still in a work in progress in that, but we're creating our own report card, our own scorecard to share with you guys and say, listen, here is the baseline information. Some of them we've had before. Some are new baseline pieces, like dual enrollment, for example. This year, 8 courses, 17 students enrolled in dual enrollment. So going forward, we hope those numbers, a few more courses in partnership with RAC, and hopefully they continue to go up. But up top, I don't know what the cause of it was. We have a few opinions about it, but they're just opinions. But we were at 84% cohort graduation rate last year, and now we moved it up 9%, 2 years ago to this year. So that's a substantial jump, and that's kind of, now we're getting closer to where we ought to be. Schools like us, with the poverty level we have, are usually 92 to 96%. That's the window. So we want to at least be there and moving forward. SATs almost identical to the year before. It was 1,009. This year is 1,008. We're just a hair above the state average of other schools taking SAT. Percentage of students taking SAT, 69% of our kids do. We've got to get that number up because it's a gateway ticket to the next piece that you're going to do. Now we have many kids who go on to 2-year school. Well, not many. About 14% go on to 2-year schools, and some kids aren't going on to school. So we're aware of it, and we're putting as kind of Rob and Mary Beth said, action plans together to address some of those issues and make sure that we're serving kids and helping them connect. The slogan that we use is helping students maximize their opportunities. It's not about every kid going to a 4-year school. Some kids have other dreams and goals, but are we preparing them to enter their chosen field at a high level? Okay, if a student wants to be a plumber, did we develop them well enough to get into the apprentice school in Newport News, Virginia? Not just have to go to maybe UTI, which is a non-competitive entrance school. All right. Going from the AP piece 2015-2016, we increased the number of kids taking AP by 85 more kids, and it's 106 more tests. Represented by some students taking more than one test. That's a substantial increase without our 3+ going down. And so we're starting to get to the right size of the number of kids taking AP and number of kids having 3s and more. That's a if you're not aware, almost 100 more students is a large jump in the number of kids enrolling in AP. And when we get the AP Human Geography going, it's going to continue to grow that way, and they'll take more and more. Pathways, too soon. We're only in the 9th grade, 10th grade group as they're starting to investigate and enter the pathways that we've designed. So that'll take some time to actually see that information. Said dual enrollment earlier. Student internships, we're working on a couple creative ideas. There's a group out there, if you ever choose to look it up, called collegevine.com, and they have mentorships with Duke, Harvard, Yale, and they actually provide the mentors from those schools. And we're looking at the potential to integrate that idea with our 9th grade freshman leadership network. So we're in the investigation level of that, and I'll have more information for you as we go down the road. We're tracking now. How many kids are getting their first choice option? So that's a soft data point because kids self-report, and they maybe wanted to go to Harvard, and then reality set in and said, no, I really wanted to go to Kutztown. So, that may be a soft point. But if they leave us with a level of satisfaction, that, I got my first choice, that we prepared them well enough to go to those things, then that's a good piece. Four-year college, 63%, two-year college, 14%. We're also going to start tracking the percentage of students in the upper-level world language courses. It's cut off on the screen, but that's because that is a gateway program to getting into the best colleges in the country. Kids taking 3 and 4 years of a world language is what it takes to get in these places. There are two major differentiators: world language to get in the most competitive universities in the country, and not that they do community services or charities or internships, but that they start them. Did you start your own charity? That's how you get into these very elite schools. They want to see this. Did you start your own business? So those are two pieces that would continue to work. SAP referrals, we had 88 last year. We're still pulling the data to find out how many disciplinary referrals we had on level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are going to survey students, parents, and families on levels of satisfaction. Are we meeting their needs? And so crafting that and saying it the right way is important, yes.
What's a SAP referral?
Student Assistance Program is a SAP referral. So kids who may be troubled or need extra support or help from Caron Foundation and our counselors, there's a program called the Bright Team, and they meet and kind of make sure that we refer kids to services, because our counselors are academic counselors. They're not psychological counselors, although sometimes kids come and think that. It's really about, do we refer them to the right agencies and right support groups?
Mr. McKnight, the SAP, is that exclusively for drug and alcohol, or does that go beyond that?
It goes beyond that. There could be grief counseling in there. It could be kids who smoke cigarettes for cessation. There's a number of different pieces. It kind of goes to the personality of the building and what kids happen to need in any given year.
Great, thank you.
So that's our metric of success. This is something I shared with you kind of way back in the interview process, that this was the pipeline that we would be measuring to say, how are we doing, and are we really preparing kids to maximize their opportunity? And so you can see we're trying to develop those pieces, hit those pieces. Some of you will be getting a Connect Ed call in about an hour about PSAT. So tomorrow's the last day they can register. So if anyone needs to do that, I guess your kid, he's too old.
My kid's a little late for that, yeah.
So yeah, he's too old for that. But you'll see acceptance rates to these competitive schools. How much are we making in scholarship award? How much money are our kids getting? Persistence rate after 1 year. One of the critical measurements is to know if we've developed them is when they leave, are they going into remedial courses? Are they dropping out? I mean, it's too hard for them. So tracking that piece, and Mr. Harris just found a tool that he shared with us, and so we'll be getting that piece, and we've got to figure out how it works to get the data in there. But yes, degree attainments in 6 years from these tools. It's a lot of self-reporting information. But quickly, the Keystone participation rates, which tells you, all our kids are taking the Keystones. SAT average scores, 507 in math, reading's 501, writing 480. ACT, we had 49 students take the ACT. We were higher than the state and national average on the composite score, but just by 0.4 of a point. 23 is the national and state average. But we're a little better than that, not a lot. Okay, this is the chart that Mr. Hurley was referring to earlier. So you can see that we've tracked the data back from 2013, 14, 15, 16 on what our SAT scores are. And, we haven't solved a lot of 513 to 507, 503, So depending on the strength of a given class, it's right about the same scores, really. There's nothing substantially jumping out. Our top 25% from this year's class, 2016, averaged on 1,100 on their SATs on the two sections. Standard deviation, you can see what that is. Here's the kind of schools that our kids, on average, can get into. If you say 1,008, they're falling right in here, and here's the list. These are competitive liberal arts colleges. That's about what the average Daniel Boone student who's going to college is prepared. We've got to get that star over here, and then we've got to get our top 25 over here. So we're looking to grow, because our strongest academic kids can get into the Villanovas, Fairfields, Loyola, etc. And those are very competitive schools to get into. Kind of gives you, we're not, on average, getting kids in here. So here's the district goals. In working with Mr. Hurley and Mr. Harris, here are the kind of district-driven ones. Here are our building ones: ensuring safety, setting high expectations for students, building collaborative and empowering work environment. And we had a great day at the high school with a lot of committee work. The committee that is working on and supports the Freshman Leadership Network, doing fantastic work. We are, going back to the conversation on study halls quite a while ago, that committee, the Study Hall and Scheduling Impact Committee, is formed and meets and is working through a host of ideas and recommendations. They will not be ready for December 1. I'm telling you, we are at a critical point at the high school, in my opinion. we picked all the low-hanging fruit, okay? So we've been able to get some growth. Now, our next step, we have got to make sure that we do the right thing, not the right now thing. So we have got to be really purposeful and really strategic and take our time to make the next move, because we're only going to get one more chance to really do that because of the economics of it. You just can't keep relaunching ideas. So we want to make sure we take our time, we're building it the right way, and we have a lot of people involved in the process. New staff, just so you know, at the high school, we have...
Mr. McKnight, then just to finish that thought, it won't be
Sure.
ready by December 2nd, so their recommendations won't make it in next year.
It will not happen for next school year, nor should it. I agree with their opinion about it. Yeah, we really want to take
Go
time.
through and do it right. and-
Yes, yes. And they're looking at all wide ranges. We collected the schedules from every school in Berks County. They wanted that.
Oh, good.
We basically gave them the constraints that really there's not going to be substantial new hiring. I mean, I am going to continue to ask you guys for a new math teacher because I think we need that. That's the smallest department at the high school. But a lot of times in that conversation, just to put you inside the walls, the first answer is let's hire more people. And that is, we're not hiring $1 million worth of salary. We don't have it. It's not going to happen. So now, that's a constraint. That's not going to happen. So come up with other answers. So Megan and I have given them the parameters of the contract and the days and the minutes. Say, okay, now you guys come forward with things you think are important. And we told them their recommendation may or may not be used. I mean, that's always the work of a committee, but you have to say that. So that's kind of where that process is. We will have it ready for launch in not next school year, but the following school year. Whatever recommendation, and that recommendation from that group, maybe to just say, hey, we think where we're at is probably what we ought to keep doing. We did put some strategies in place in study halls, and we've changed the culture of study halls right now, where they're just, they're silent study halls. That's just what it comes down to. We ask the kids to not be, they can do their own thing, but there's really not to be any talking. And we simply just move the teacher from the front of the classroom to the back of the room, and kids can never tell when the teacher's looking at them. So it's simple, but it works. And so that's been pretty good for us. But that group will have a recommendation. They may have it in the spring, but it won't be implementable until the following year.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jake Snyder, new life skills teacher, going very well down there for him. I mean, he's a rookie teacher, a guy right out of college, young guy, but he's doing a nice job. Matt Wolf, the musical, instrumental music band director. It's hard to follow a guy like Mr. Gurman, I'll say that. Very popular guy, very polished guy, and Mr. Wolf is growing into that opportunity. And then GCA, custodial and maintenance. I'm sure you've heard things from your constituency about that issue. It's been okay. We've had some good, we've had some bad at the high school with it. We'd like quicker turnaround personally as an administrator or teaching group, but we'll see. We just got to give it more time for them to get up online, and we got to be patient to really say whether it's a good fit or not. Okay, here's the things that have been implemented, although I presented these to you before. We actually have the implementation underway. Freshman Leadership Network, the dual enrollment piece you're aware of, Pathways Learning Option, the partnerships with National Center for College and Career Transitions, which is partnered with PDE and the Pathways Innovation Network. We got on board with Pathways before the state did. But now that's a major model going forward. Of course, about our partnership with RAC. We'd love to grow more partnerships. It's just, there's just not enough people to go out there and have those meetings and follow up on those meetings, honestly. So we try to do the best we can. Foundations of Math, Alex, going to Mr. Kurtz's question, we recognize there's some challenges. We've built a plan to address those challenges. The Foundations of Math course in 9th grade for students who aren't quite ready, they will be taking, going forward, coming out of 8th grade and into 9th grade, we're going to be giving them readiness tests to get a real sense of where they are and where we should put them. So those pieces we think are the beginning parts of addressing some of the math challenge. Schoolology, you guys, Mr. Mass can speak better to it, or even Mrs. Weber, I know kind of what it is, but it's not something I use, but it's very similar to my son's thing, which is Canvas, and parents can see their work and communicate. It's an interface, so to speak. Credit recovery, moving forward, we actually had our first student actually use credit recovery to graduate, so was thrilled because it's probably a kid we would have lost. So even if it's one, we'll take it. Blazer Summer, I think we've hit on that the last time. I'm not going to go into that in depth. But Ted Isselman is working on maybe not the first, but maybe the first in a long time, career day at the high school, and building that piece out. And that should happen hopefully we're on track for April. Kids will go through interview practices with real companies, say, what's it like to interview? And Mr. McAtee offered that service. It's the company he works for. He does that kind of work. And he's going to say, I'm going to share with them the real deal. You come into an interview with ripped up clothes or not prepared, so there's going to be a value there. They're going to meet other companies. So, areas for our growth, our SAT and ACT enrollment has got to go up. Yes.
Under new programs, Coral Reef?
Yes, that's part of the AP environmental piece. So that's more of a project that's in that program.
Okay.
But that is, it's interesting you brought that up because it's really moving forward now. I want to say, what was it, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, they actually put the coral in and species are starting to come out of that coral. It's starting to happen. But it's
Okay.
not pretty like you and I think of it. It looks very industrial in there. But you guys are welcome to come over and see it. It's interesting
I
to
think
see
it
those.
still makes us a premier high school.
Absolutely. It's an interesting project, and it's great to have that partnership with Rosemont.
Any SpongeBob active?
Those SpongeBob coming out, a couple starfish, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Our areas for growth, like I said, SAT and ACT enrollment, helping get kids supported there. Graduation rate, it's moved forward. We got to get, and we just had our meeting today about tying the teachers' SLOs to these elements in the SPP. So the goals and projects they're working on are connected to these areas directly. Historically underperforming students, you're looking at students by minority by race, special education, and what am I missing, Ron? Oh, poverty. Yeah, and poverty. We have a problem, okay? If the 2 red arrows we have are connected to this area. We have got to find solutions to help serve those students, provide the supports that they need to move them forward. So that's athletics. I know I touched base, I believe, with Mr. Rathgab and some others about this. I believe we need an athletic commission to work with Mr. Schmidt, help Mr. Schmidt. I will publicly say I do not think we are supporting athletic programming and activities at the level we ought to. I think that we're creating a model that is heavily dependent on the families and parents, and that brings a host of other challenges with it when you create that model. So to get an athletic commission together and some folks to look at that and come up with good solutions, somebody from the board, somebody from administration, a parent, a player, student themselves, something to that effect. So I've given Mr. Schmidt that goal, and he's going to work on that. School attendance, our assistant principals are very good now in terms of tracking that down, the truancy elimination plans, going down to district justice, citing that. All those things have been helpful. Additionally, Mrs. Rhodes, put some more things in place to make sure that we have kind of double check system to make sure kids are being categorized the right way. I think that's helped us. So Pathways Virtual Internships is an area for growth, and then the Expert and Artist in Residency program is also an area for growth. We have faculty members now reaching out to people in the field that they know, and they're bringing experts in for workshops. And so then students sign up for those workshops, they go down there. So I know Mr. Hoffman, for example, who is our resident theater guru, he has brought a number of people in from Broadway and off-Broadway now, and they're going to be doing, talking to kids about that kind of programming. The social studies folks are reaching out to lawyers to come in, so forth and so on. So we're in the infancy there, moving that model forward. How'd I do, Mrs. Weber? Did I make it?
Fast.
40 seconds left.
Left.
Literally, yeah.
40 seconds.
Oh,
not
what,
bad.
10 minutes?
No,
Oh,
10 minutes.
22, I think I said.
22?
Yes. Any questions, guys?
40 seconds worth?
I made it by 40
20
seconds.
seconds
So the
worth of
questions are on your time.
questions?
Guys, you can email me anytime and I'll give you whatever you need. So.
Very nice.
I do have a question,
Yes.
Mr. McKnight, and I think that was a great presentation. I'm so excited about all of these different things that are happening at the high school. And I'm very proud of the advanced placement courses and the interest shown there, but not only the interest, but the achievement. But my question is about, I'm looking at this chart, the DBHS Historic Performance Line Graph.
Yes.
And it seems like, I know 2016 is our best year, and that's fantastic. But it seems like 2015 was more of an off year.
Mm-hmm.
You have a little trough.
Yeah.
And it looked up until then we were doing pretty much, we were doing well, and then a little bit of a dip.
Mm-hmm.
So my question there, and I'm sure with how interested you are in this data, you've gone back. Have we been, I know data is fantastic to forecast out, but can we go back in history and kind of look at and retool our data and try to figure out what went wrong that year, or what didn't work as well as it could have, that resulted in that drop in terms of the ranking? And because that could be just as useful as knowing, well, this works. Well, if we know that this doesn't work, then we
I
can
think if
correct
you look
it.
back at the lagging
Like, look at this as lagging data, okay? So it's at least a year off, and sometimes it's 2 years until that information comes online, depending on which piece of data it is. So that reflects, in my opinion, the tremendous amount of transition that was happening at the high school at that time. You know, you had one principal going out, you had one person coming in. You had a superintendent going out, you had a superintendent coming in. So there was a lot of pieces and a lot of what I would consider turmoil, for lack of a better term, just collectively, not only in the building level.
Too, right?
Well, and the tests got harder. That's true. The Common Core elements came on, but I think it's more. We've stabilized now. We've stabilized the foundation. We're stronger there. So that's my opinion about it. We've also put some pieces in math where they have that foundations course. We put the Keystone Biology Support course in last year. Now we pulled it out this year because the state says it's not a requirement. And to that point, I think, Connor, we might see a dip next year because that data will come online when the kids didn't need it for graduation. And when that not hanging over their head could be impactful. Now, we're cognizant of it and we're dealing with it, but that could be something to watch as we go forward.
Good, Connor?
Yeah, I was just thinking, though, up until Mr. McKnight, you made that last point about how we may see a dip next year. These items, I perhaps am incorrect in viewing them really as snapshots in time because they're not single snapshots. They're many discrete data points pulled from all different times. Like there could be a 2-year lag for some data, whereas for other data, it might be from that immediate preceding year. Mm-hmm. So really, it's like a bunch of snapshots all put together into, I don't know, a scrapbook or something. So with that in the back of my mind, and also considering that this turmoil, this transition, it doesn't just affect the graduating class. It affects all students at that school. So the effects of 1 year of transition may be seen across 4 years. I guess my point is, up until you said that next year we might see a dip because of the biology change.
Well, that's all 3 areas that'll be under that accountability for graduation.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm thinking that perhaps maybe taking into account that this turmoil is beginning to recede now that you've been in place for a while, and we might I hope to see that our scores continue to go up.
Well, I would hope so too. I mean, and we're going to work to that end. I think the issue is it's not just the stabilization for the high school. I think district wide. I mean, there's more stabilization going on. So at the board level, at the high school level, all the way around. I mean, you have the same team in play here for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
For 12 straight months.
All right, thank you.
You got it.
I'd like to thank you also for the data. When I first got on this board, it was a dream that we could even be debating these kind of numbers, and now we actually have the numbers and can make informed decisions. I appreciate it from everybody involved.
Yeah, I've already expressed my, appreciation for your team and yourself and your team over there. I think that jump is great.
Well, I want to be clear, guys, that really, the teachers are the drivers. I need to make sure you understand that and feel that,
Right.
Because if they were not willing, it would just be turbulence
Right.
and difficulty. So,
But you gave us a picture of what's going on.
yeah, they're leading that charge. So,
Yes, thank you.
okay, thanks, guys.
All right. So that's it on the agenda. Is there any new business from anybody else in administration or the committee that wants to bring forward? All right. I guess no public comment here since there's no public. Connor, anything from you?
Nope. Glad we finished up a little bit
You
early.
could grab a bite to eat before the meeting.
Hopefully.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. All right. So meeting over at 7:04.